we went ahead and funded an opinion poll. And I would want to say, in as much as I've not been sent by any of the other pollsters, whatever I'm going to say, I know it reflects what they would say in this kind of a situation. And I want to believe that also, and Nation Media, which is also here on this table, and which was also doing an opinion poll, this would also be their stand, that all our opinion polls did not predict the outcome of the results. According to the law, these opinion polls, all of them, the final ones were released, I think around the 2nd, 3rd of August. We all appreciate and understand that in politics, one day is a very long period of time. All the polls were very close in terms of the percentage that was given to Raila. All the polls, including the Nation Media. In fact, all of them had a difference of 1% or 2%, 1%, 2%, all of them, giving between 47 and 49%. All the polls that were there.
Not all.
No, I'm saying the ones that were published, locally published in our
so not all. Media.
So those, the ones that were published, and of course the Nation Media on their page, they have exactly, I think you have 4 of them that were published. And there was a proportion also between 39 and 44%. 39 and 44%. Yeah. That was also given to Dr. Ruto. And there was also a varied percentage of undecided or undeclared votes. The undeclared votes, it was somewhere between 5% and 9%. Somewhere between 5% and 9%. Now, statistically, the interpretation of this poll, actually, and when you look at our report, the first thing that it says that if all factors hold constant. Now, let me pause there. What does that mean? When we say if all factors hold constant, it means that voters will wake up on that particular day. No. Remember, we are doing this 6 days before the poll. That's when the release is happening. Before the actual. So, if all factors hold constant, number one, it assumes that between that day and the day of the election, nothing major happens to shape or reshape opinion of voters. That's number one. Number two, if all factors hold constant, then it means that there will be nothing that comes in between the voter, their preference, any variable. Everything holds constant. But then the question and the reality is that a correct position in our politics? There was campaigns, there was voter turnout, which was probably, you must have seen the numbers that have been given here and there. And then there was a lot of things that happened. I think 4 or so days before the poll, we saw a disagreement that was put on media between Wajakoya and his running mate, for example. All those are factors that did not stay constant. And then we went into the election itself. And then there has been the tallying and everything, verification of those results. And then we are here today. You must have seen what you've seen on the screens. A dispute. Do we still have all factors held constant? Let me say this. In a previous poll in America, this was between George Bush and I think Al Gore. And the state of Texas, I think, or Florida, was contested. The counting continued on for a long time, and finally, against all grain, George Bush was declared the president. And the following day, the politoon, or the political cartoon in Kenya, was the late President Daniel Arap Moi, saying or opining, now tomorrow Bush will be calling me to tell me about democracy. So anybody who wants to question opinion poll first should demonstrate to us that the situation or the conditions or the circumstances have been constant since the time the opinion polls were released and today for them to question. And I want to say, let's not play holiness. Let's not play holy Moses. Holy Moses smells of roses, but should be taken in small doses. So Kenyans should understand that kind of a process and then not play holy. We are not here simply because the factors have been constant. There were undecided voters. They decided. We did not have undecided voters at the ballot. They decided and voted. So when you put those together, any of the candidates could have carried the day. And actually, that was our conclusion. Any of these candidates will carry the day. So when anybody there who is saying opinion polls predicted it wrongly, you are so wrong. You don't know the numbers. You need to consult the statisticians, but understand the theory and the interpretation of the numbers, because you'll just interpret them wrongly and create unnecessary, questions that shouldn't.
So what you're saying is that between the time when this poll was done, when the data was collected,
yes,
and the time when Kenyans went to the ballot, there were some factors that changed so significantly they turned around the...
It is a possibility, yes, and it was very much declared in the interpretation of the results. If all factors hold constant, nothing held constant. We are just from statements here. Is that a constant situation?
But you knew the parties were campaigning.
Irrespective, that, unfortunately, we have to operate within the law that has been set about opinion
polls.
Which
you could not do polls.
We could not do polls on the last day for us to be able to give you like a very specific, this is what will happen tomorrow.
I think for me...
Sorry, just for that, are you legally allowed to just collect data on the day before the election, then...
on condition you don't publish that data.
Yes.
But we did not do that ourselves. We did not have the resources to do that.
Okay.
Neither did we do an exit poll. So we only gave the situation of the country. And if anybody cares to note, our opinion poll was very much based on the issues. So people are only looking at one number, but ignoring all the other issues that were raised, because the voters had serious issues that they needed to be addressed. And we will still insist, whoever becomes the president at the end of the day, those are the views that voters say, and they should be addressed.
Okay. You wanted to say something?
No, no, one, this is regrettable, because it's not even regretting as a scientist, because science improves, all right? And then, yes, I'm not a pollster or a statistician, but there is science in court every time. And it is interrogated. And that is why we can talk of junk science and science that even the judge can use. So science is no strange. And I took statistics of psychology. And I read a book called... so you are the expert. I read a book called Damn Lies and Statistics. That polls don't lie. It is the people who lie. Okay, that's number one. Number two, that polls are used to support weak arguments. So my antenna is usually raised as a lawyer when you tell me the polls says. I look at what are you trying to say. And maybe you cannot say it by itself, and you have to grapple with poll. Of course, I understand that poll is like a snapshot. If you took a picture of me today or right now, I will dress this way. Maybe in the evening I might put on a hat. So somebody should not say that that is the same day, because it is a moving target. I accept all that.
So aren't you already looking at the polls with a biased view, even from the point of being presented to you? Aren't you already having a lens of doubt? So doesn't it mean that you'll never believe in polls?
Two things.
Isn't data what is used to make decisions?
I think that, actually the world is moving to case studies, because they have realized, yes, the world is now...
Still data.
The world is realizing the deception. You see, statistically, you can say that a man walking with a dog, both of them on average have 3 legs. Because the dog brings 4 legs, the guy brings 2 legs, those are 6, divide by 2, each one have 3. But it is far from the reality. So we are not birds that just open their mouth and is fed any science. We must interrogate. And I do that objectively because I've also done research. PhD is a research, isn't it? Yeah, and in my research, even as anybody else who have done PhD, is that what the most important fact is not collecting data, but interpreting those data. Because everybody knows, one, you do a research on an area that is of interest to you. So you are already biased, but that's not the real deal. There's no problem with you being biased as long as you let the data lead you. If I choose to do a research on an area, I'm doing it because I love that area. So I have my bias, but I can still make the data drive me. So when you look at the polls and the way they play out, the question you ask, for example, when the US wanted to leave UN or defund UN, the question the pollster were asking in America was, do you believe that our national interest decision should be made by the UN or our president? Obviously, people will say no, our president. Then the interpretation was the US have no confidence in the UN. So interpretation is very important. And when you have got it wrong, it is not an indictment on you, it is an indictment on your methodology or the interpretation. So you cannot just say the raw data said. Why am I saying that? You are not doing poll in America, Florida. You are doing poll in Kenya for Kenyans, who you also know because you have a background data, and that one, they are deceptive. Two, this is how they behave, and these are the trend. So that when you simply say, oops, a week later, things changed, then what was the value? Because remember, these are the poll that now Azimio quickly built billboards about. Your polls was put high on the sky on billboards as the science says it. Now we are here where we are because the scientists got it wrong. And then the same scientists come and say that because the politicians are saying there's a problem, voila, I'm vindicated.
Let me just ask
this is bad.
No, let me just ask you. No. I think you're also negating a point he raises.
Okay, yes.
That
things might have changed.
yes, things do change. You've seen, I mean, otherwise, why were the politicians still campaigning until the day they were told to? Because they were trying to convert people, either those who are voting for someone, going to vote for someone else, or those who are not decided, or those who are decided they will not vote.
But you see,
why aren't you factoring in this reality?
We should. But you see, they're not my numbers, they are his numbers.
Yes.
So the fact that I'm interrogating them does not mean I have better numbers. For example,
no, but you're negating.
I doubt the explanation that Wajakoya and the running mate tweet that went bad, where Wajakoya was saying I might endorse Baba, and the running mate was saying I disagreed, are the factors, are the game-changing factors, are the nuclear options. Surely, I don't think that factor could tilt so much up to 6%. Finally, I think in my view,
given what Wajakoya
got, that those are the factors. But finally, for me, I think that it is science. It's the humility of science, because science is logics. All right, that mathematics is logic. It is understanding that the reflection that should be going on is pollsters locking themselves in a room and saying, why did we get it wrong? At least start from that point of view. You might have good reasons why it didn't go the way you wanted, but start from that point of view, because that is what I think will be helpful of how
again, and I'm not holding brief for them. I'll let Mudhoka speak, but you're arguing that why did they get it wrong? So yours is already,
the results. Yeah.
Is it correct to say why they got it wrong, or why the figures differed?
Why they got it wrong in this sense? Even given the momentum, I said interpretation is the most important thing.
Yes.
If they knew that this is how Deputy President is moving the trajectory, and is having 5 rallies while the competitor is having 2, in interpretation of the results, they should have given the room, because what is important is the story behind the numbers. If you just give me the raw numbers and say, well, I went to Nini, and that is why I started by saying, we were seeing other polls that were all along showing Deputy President ahead. And therefore, it cannot be, but we got it wrong, so many of us, therefore, surely do not act holier than thou. Who is this holier than thou? We are not pollsters. We are consumers of pollsters, and we are raising reasonable doubt about them.
Let Mudhoka respond before we cross over to Zainab.
And perhaps as he responds, I think for me the greater issue there is this ceteris paribus.
All things held constant.
Yeah, the all things held constant factor. When they were polling, given the background, they already knew the trend. They already, I would want to imagine that you studied how when you campaign for a week, when a candidate campaigns for a week, this is how far they go. When a candidate campaigns, you know, once in 7 days, this is what it means. I would like to imagine something like that happens, so that by the time you are ceteris paribus, this 1 week, you have an idea of what it could do, you know, which way it could tilt things based on how the ceteris paribus for the previous weeks has been. You know, it's not just out in the open.
But is it really for the statistician who cannot entirely predict? Because you'll find some politicians will say something on the day before the election and it sways votes away from them. Is it possible?
Which something is this that was said?
Yeah, and of course there are many. There are literally many. There was a religious conversation long after the polls were done. I'm just citing examples. There were many things that happened. Yeah, so let's not ignore the fact that there were many factors that changed. But one of the things that we also fault, you know, how some of these things are reported is because we report the numbers only, and the interpretations which are actually very, very clear. And with me, I have an interpretation which I gave you to read. This is what the statement we gave to the media. And
sound bites.
At the punchline, we're very clear. With 7 days to the election day, race still has tangible twists and turns. What does that mean? So the interpretation was already there. We looked at those various situations and scenarios and interpreted it very clearly. In fact, as I talk to you, one of the things that is actually very, very clear is that Raila Odinga, the final tally, is not very far away from what the pollsters predicted. If he's at 49 and the pollsters predicted somewhere between...
But the competitor?
And there, yes, and exactly there are reasons behind that. For example, when we say that there's this level of undecided vote, that could sway the election this way. And you actually even give how the election could be swayed. So we look at the numbers only. We don't look at the interpretation that the pollsters put in. And then we have this one massive judgment about them. Okay. So have we interrogated the interpretation? Because it was there.
So you're saying to some extent that is... No, is null and void. The second null and void in this afternoon.
Are they planning to review?
We will, of course we will.
Okay, please share that report.
As Ipsos, we will, please share and we hope that this is something that we can actually share.
Okay.
But we want to request everybody for objectivity. Okay. You know, objectivity when reading this, reviewing this, commenting about it, and in not in any emotional way, of course. You know, Kenyans and led by Prof.
Objectivity does not mean kata some slack. It sounds like that.
As that habit of becoming the expert in interpretation of things that completely they do not have even the the knowledge about.
No, you give the numbers to us to interpret.
Okay. Yeah, so the moment they interpret the numbers and then fail to interpret the fail even to consider
and get it
the
wrong.
Interpretations,
and the
then we
context
get it wrong
and the lights.
Exactly.
Okay. Before you jump in again, because I know you're very passionate.
No,
about
I'm not. We all got it wrong. At least he's admitting. He's saying I might have got it wrong.
I have a reservation about calling it wrong because it is said that it's us at the date the data was collected. It is not saying it's the guarantee of, I guess, of the polling day. And so anyway, we'll get to that.
Reliability is very important in statistics.
It is. And at this point, so that we can remain reliable in terms of getting diverse information, we're going to be relying on Zainab Ismail now to give us some more updates, and then we'll come and bring this to a close, this round table. Zainab.
All right, Dan, that's why we call you the numbers guy. You certainly will be bringing context into all those numbers. Very interesting. Well, but just before you continue, Agano Party presidential candidate David Moure now claims his party has evidence that some goons who tried to interfere with the tallying exercise at the Bomas of Kenya are linked to the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Party. Well, he claims the goons managed to access the highly secure National Tallying Center disguised as observers carrying documents which they were getting from Azimio officials in a plan to manipulate the presidential election outcome. Mwaure claims a laptop and other materials disappeared in the tussle that ensued at Bomas. Mwaure says he and his party agents are willing to record statements on the same, as they also oppose any move to petition the presidential results at the Supreme Court. So, Dan, that is the latest coming from one of the, now I can say, former presidential candidate, David Waiga Mwaure, with regard to, of course, some of those issues raised on the election outcome.
Our chief agent and others have evidence of goons who came in the tallying floor on the night of Saturday 13th, disguised as agents, but disguised as observers, but working as agents of Azimio, and were carrying with them documents. Among the documents were Form 34As, and other papers, which they would get and were getting from the Azimio chief agent at the corner or the table where the agent was seated. During the process and a tussle that started that night and ensued, among others, a computer disappeared among others. This act we strongly condemn. We also condemn the acts of violence that we showed yesterday, and particularly acts of violence that were meted against the returning officer and the chairman of IEBC. We are ready and willing to write statements with the DCI, my agents, and for me, the part I saw, and to be part of and oppose any petition to be filed against His Excellency Dr. William Samoei Ruto.
As we were seated there, we observed people who disguised as observers who came in because they had official badges as per requirement. But eventually we realized there is a change of character. Whereas we know the work of observer is to observe, but not to manipulate or even to enter into the details where IEBC staff and agents were much involved. But eventually we realized they came, began to manipulate. I alarmed to Commissioner Waderi, and eventually nothing was done. I insisted, still nothing was done. On the same course, we realized they were targeting particular computers or laptops in the house, some of which were IEBC materials or agents' materials. I studying on one desk. Actually, I was not verifying together with the team on the desk. Mine was only to see how my agent is carrying on the business because I was overseeing. But eventually, 3 principals of Azimio came on that desk when I was studying. They questioned the computer, which was being held by a man, I don't know the name, and they insisted that that computer should be put off the desk. The young man obeyed.
All right, so that's the latest development there with regard to the election outcome that was announced yesterday by the IEBC. We'll be discussing that in just a bit. But also, an independent observer group has said the results of the August 9th presidential election as announced by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission are in line with its own projections. There were controversies before the announcement of the results on Monday, with 4 of the IEBC's 7 electoral commissioners leaving the National Tallying Center to stage a news conference in another part of this county in Nairobi. While in response, the Elections Observers Group, ELOG, said it was also waiting for more details as promised by the commissioners, but was certain its scientific methodology was in order.
We are extremely concerned about the chaos that broke out at the National Tallying Center at Bomas of Kenya, as well as a split within the IEBC, leading to some commissioners to quit from the tallying process and issue their own statements prior to the announcement of the presidential results. ILOG therefore calls on all Kenyans to remain calm and maintain peace under the circumstances. We further call on the candidates to resolve disputes over election results, including results for the presidential election, peacefully through legal channels.
In my view, if he's performing his constitutional duty, I don't see that the absence of the other commissioners can be, but the Supreme Court will have to pronounce itself on that. Because elsewhere in the procedures, it says that when the board is meeting, when the commissions are meeting, then there is a quorum for that. So the Supreme Court will have to deal with, was this a meeting for which the board had to meet the quorum? That is a question for the constitutional, if the petition is taken to Supreme Court, the Supreme Court will pronounce itself on that.
You still have social media that is a powerful tool for information. It has been instrumental. However, on matters election, it has been clear we need to fact check. And for any questions in terms of, for example, any issue that has to do with the results, the official source, as has been stated consistently, has been the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. So we hope Kenyans will be able to interact with that, and whatever information is being relayed, even at this point, our appeal is a use of the media responsibly, and the question of fact-checking. That is very, very important. But bottom line, as we have stated, we herald the celebration and the gains. And notable that Kenyans need to appreciate is we've actually had an electoral cycle that has not had any social media interruption. That by itself is a milestone.
All right, so that's a statement there by the Election Observers Group, ILOG, also pronouncing itself on the tallying. They were doing a parallel tallying of the results at their own data center that they had actually launched a couple of days to the election, and saying that those numbers actually almost are the same from those that were declared by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, but still the contestation is on from the other side, which is the Azimio One Kenya coalition, declaring those results null and void by their own right. But Dan, very interesting to see these developments, especially that remark there and statement by David Mwaure with regard to the intrigues around the Bomas of Kenya before the announcement of the results.
Very much so, and this is something I'd like my panelists to, chime into in regards to Waihiga's views, in his allegations of, accusing Azimio for being behind, the chaos we saw at Bomas. What's your view, madam?
You make me sound so Waihiga, Mwaure. I think for me, first, let me start by saying the four gentlemen who presented themselves, gathered courage and offered their candidature. I think those are people we must really, celebrate, because it takes a lot. Mm-hmm. And again, this is another very great son of this country. He is playing his part. It may not have gone his way, but how can he chip in towards building our institutions so that it gets better going forward? Because now, for the ordinary citizen like Acheng, it looks like with every presser, we are getting to understand OPEC even more, because the issue was the process was opaque. That's the greatest issue of contestation, and we're trying to understand. So opaque is...
So opaque is opaque.
But in English, But now in English...
No, it seems like the explanation, the claim of opaqueness is opaque. It's not easy to see through it itself, the claim itself. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and they're trying to remove whatever it is, the layers, so that it becomes clear and we understand. Because when it gets to court, it will become a legal issue, and we will not, none of us who are just lay people will understand. So now when you say opaque, we understand opaque from the perspective of the four commissioners, and we understand opaque from the perspective of Mwaure, So increasingly we are getting to know, and I like that the second coin you you invited, you had, you know, you like made an invitation that we need to hear the other side of the other side of the coin, the other side of the story. It was Azimio on one side. Now it is anti-Azimio, you know, pointing a finger at Azimio. And even before we get to the courts, I am glad that we are actually getting to know what it is that we did not get right. And at the point of recommendation, because I think in my space, we dwell on, this is the journey we have walked. What lessons have we picked? What recommendations, how should we go? How should we move going forward, you know, in terms of sustainability and for better impact, you know, so that the law serves us. We should not be enslaved to the law, especially now that we don't even understand it anyway. We should come up with legislation that speaks to that which we think is a problem. They are helping us. And I hope another person also comes and gives us their perspective. ELOG, today we're just talking about PVT. I hope observers will also come and address themselves to the opaqueness, you know, so that we have as many perspectives as possible. When
also the independent ones.
Exactly. So that when we get to the point of the ruling by the Supreme Court, we are on the same page. We understand whatever a lot of English which they read in one day, we will understand it. Yeah.
I think the matter that is before us Kenyans is a very emotive issue. And catharsis, or the process of healing, first starts by, you know, confronting the reality. And confronting the reality sometimes can be extremely emotive. And I think we should prepare ourselves just to receive a lot much more of this, because it is how the process of healing will start, you know, and we are looking forward to a country that will heal out of all the scenarios and divisions that may be brought about by this. And again, exercising our freedom of speech in this country, it's only fair enough for that candidate, Mwaure, to, you know, come on the light and state what he thinks or what he knows. And he is entitled to his position, because that is Mwaure's position, and somebody else will also come and state their position. You know, that's a situation and a very emotive issue, and especially now that this issue has taken two different sides. So like my sister says, yeah, I think it will only be fair enough to allow reason and allow us to go through that kind of a process where all this will be said, some of them very emotively, some with tears, others with a lot of jest and all that manner of situation. But I think we need to go through that, because that's how the healing process starts. And that's what psychologists tell us, that, you know, when something of this magnanimity happens, the first thing outrightly is, you know, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of denial, and then of course then we go into depression, and then there's a lot that goes until now we start accepting, and then we heal, and then we move forward. There are those who say, you know, theoretically this is a process that could take almost up to 90 days. But now that is theory. So let's allow us to go through this, and whoever has something that they would say. Of course, the legal minds will judge it when it is presented in a, you know, in a legal situation or in a legal circumstance. And I would want to leave that, you know, the legal jargon or the legal detail to the professionals who are in my capacity or who in my understanding, I think they are very capable of dealing with some of those issues. Which us, the lesser motors, are not able to really comment with a lot of, you know, authority. Definitely.
Daktari, what is your view on, you know, Mwaure Waihiga's assertions and claims?
Yeah, I think they said they are willing and I assume able to write a statement. You see, for me, until they write a statement, they are mere assertions. You know, I hope people don't turn this press to be a wailing wall. Israel have a place called Wailing Wall where you just go and wail. And you see, wailing has no formula, so you do it anyhowly. You can shoot from the hip and just come with wild allegation, because it become a little also dangerous for the country. If you have something to say, please say it. But maybe there is no, you know, don't shout fire in a crowded elevator just because you have a freedom of speech, if there is no fire, for example. And so, of course, we are seeing Chieng is enjoying this. There is mud around. As long as people are throwing mud, let us get to mud. But I think at the end of the day, there is one body which had the responsibility. The rest were participants. And so when a participant talk, it is fair to take whatever they're saying with a pinch of salt. But we have somebody who was to participate as an independent commission. And therefore, the RO, returning officer, Chebukati, must speak. I think he should address, but I saw him today, he had the Gazette notice.
Yes, he's gazetted. Of
the results. You know, it will be hard to go to court to say we have come because these results are invalid because we were not, he didn't let us see them, for example. So when I say that some arguments are weak, I say it with a heavy heart. That I don't envision how that comes into the pleading, that we didn't see them before they were announced, because you must show how that result or that not seeing interfered with the outcome generally, because law do not deal in triviality. But finally, I also think that it is an opportunity for two things: reliability and validity. In the counting, in our polls, reliability means that when somebody counts after you, they will find the same results. Validity means that there is very little room for error. And when we start playing with maths, we start playing with data, then what remains as truth become very little. Because, you know, when you go to a rally, people exaggerate, and people's antenna are up because they know hiyo ni siasa. But when somebody come and say, this is the mathematic, for example, you know, you debunked the error of 140,000 and said even in that calculation, it is 1,400. So when, you know, the credibility become that if you get it wrong in one thing, or if you lie to me on one thing, then how should I be confident that you are saying the truth in other important things? So you lose your credibility. But let reliability and validity guide this country for once. Guide the pollster, guide the calculation, guide the panelist, so that we don't argue that 1 + 1 is 5, and it is 5 because at the point I was doing it, it could have even been 4. Science is good.
I am enjoying the mud because I am building a mud house. So I have an opportunity for people to give me raw material to build my house.
Muzoka, as they're building houses and trying to tear each other down.
I need to take Prof on. You know, when Daktari talks about reliability and validity, Daktari, would you present facts here and figures about the reliability and validity? Now, this is facts. This is science. Can you present that about how the polls are not reliable and how they are not valid based on actual facts?
Based on poll?
No, facts.
Yeah, the facts here are poll, isn't it? That you, throughout, one coalition was very happy with your polls, all right? For the reason that your poll was putting one at 48 and the other one at 42. Yet, we were seeing other polls, Mr. Pollster, that were, yes, we were, and I will share with you, that were showing that this one you are putting at 42 has 52.
Daktari, why weren't they published in the first place?
Reuters had their polls out there, even in Star.
No, it was not published.
What do you mean by publication?
In the public domain, it is all over there. It is there in the public domain. It can be seen. It can be verified.
So is it a race to publish or a race to be?
No, because this is knowledge. Bring
perhaps
it.
a way forward again.
Yeah, way
given
forward
what
is
I
important.
do. Yes.
Yeah. Postmortem of this science.
It will be important
Because it's
to
not
study.
witch logic. You know, there is witchcraft. See, when I meet somebody and my mother tells
We
me,
were on the way
avoid so
forward.
so is a witch.
We were on the way forward.
Oh, yeah, way forward.
So which is which?
Witchcraft is not good.
No, witch is witch.
Because you can't prove
There are
that
two
so and so
witches.
is a witch, isn't it? If I say so and so is a witch, it is based on my hunch. But science should be reliable
Probably you've
and
seen
valid.
them practicing witchcraft, but that's besides the point. You
The
had
way
something to
forward
say.
is, I think it would be important to study how this particular, the polls that Daktari is very unhappy about, to look at the two figures and try and understand what is this ceteris paribus, what is this, the unceteris, what is the opposite, what is the reality that happened in these 9 days that may have changed the factor. I think for me that makes a very interesting area for study,
For further
because
research.
exactly, because going forward it might be inform future polls, because maybe it is that it could be that in the last week is what matters. How you campaign in the last week is what matters. It could be that there are things that happen. It could be, so for me it's an important area to look
And
at
I fully
going
agree
forward.
with you. I fully agree with you. It's only that you know, this conversation is lopsided because Prof has already taken sides.
Please not.
Because I would want
You
us
can
to
redeem yourself.
I would want us to query numbers that are in the public domain. Because every other political party did insist that they have also carried out their own polls. But again, the science and the logic and everything behind those polls is only known to them. It is not in the public domain. So I wouldn't reference on that. And then I think the facts are there and they're very, very clear. What basically we are trying to say is that let's not play holy. Let's not play holy. Let's
In
not,
English, please.
when I say let's not play holy, let's not blame opinion polls when we are also in the midst of a circumstance, a situation, which is part of the factors hold constant. So that as long as we do not have control about all those other factors, and for example, my sister has put it very well here, as long as we don't have even control about the activities and the eventualities of a whole period of a week before the polls, and yet it is very clear. It's very clear in the interpretation. So just look at the number and then you shoot the messenger, but you don't even look at, you don't even care to look at the interpretation. I think it is a hindsight. Unfortunately, that's how that's how our society looks at things and interprets them. Yeah.
Yes, Zainab has something to.
Right, Dan. So I don't know if my mic is on, but just to chime into that conversation, I think it is not worthy to probably assume or look at it this way, that perhaps, and historically looking at how the pollsters have performed, at least in the past 2 elections, it would be, safe to say that we should move away from perhaps looking and, using surveys to predict election outcomes in this country.
Let me just respond to you. The 2017 election, have they opened the servers? Do you know who the winner was? Do we know who the winner was? We don't know. Do we even, for example, let me just give you a very clear example. And,
but we go by what the IBC.
So, we go by what the IBC says, okay, which was nullified by court, irrespective of how we look at it. So there are issues that are in the political process. Unfortunately, politicians are always the holy ones. So pollsters are not holy. So politicians would want to look at what did the poll say. But how was the process and all these other factors, did they hold constant? So for 2017 is classic, we don't know. And we could easily go back to quite a number of the issues that we see being contested each and every other day. Talks something about the process. So we cannot separate both. We need to look at both of them from a point of the process itself could have things that need to be improved on. And also the science itself also needs to have things that are, and let me say this, and this is a good clarification. Perhaps, polls are usually based on samples. It's a sample survey, okay? And because it is an intense you know, for example, I know most of our colleagues or others who are doing polls did phone surveys. Ipsos decided to go face-to-face and interviewed 6,000 people. You interview 6,000 people. If the science is correct, even 1,000, even 2,000 should predict us, you know, should predict the outcome. And we have seen this in other markets. And we are not using a local methodology. Actually, we are using global best practices when we are doing this. And in a situation, you know, where, for example, you go to Lamu County and you sample, I'm saying for reality, you know, you sample 100 or 200, for example. Lamu has a lot of constituencies. If you look at the voting pattern in the constituencies of Lamu, for example, they are worlds apart. They are worlds apart. So for you to be able, and Lamu is one of the smallest counties in this country, for you to be able to represent Lamu completely and correctly, perhaps you need a sample of 4,000, no, 450, somewhere around there. And if you did a sample of 450 across the whole country, that would get you to a sample of probably 18,000. And to do a sample of 18,000, you need a couple of $100,000. An investment that probably is not available. So all those limitations, which are clearly stated in the findings, all those are limitations, which are clearly stated in the findings, could also provide an alternative because we want to improve the processes as we go along. So it is not one side is wrong and the other one is right.
So, but looking at the disputed nature of the official results within the history of our elections,
yes,
there has been, you know, a narrative or statements that have been made with regard to the kind of polls that, you know, the pollsters have managed to come up with in terms of the numbers. Is it then an unfair assessment for, you know, the political players in the space to term pollsters as politically motivated?
You see, one of the arguments that have been fronted is that he who pays the piper calls the shots. Okay. One of the things we need to understand is that the political parties themselves also do polls, which are never published and which are never known. But the few pollsters that have come out in the limelight and presented their polls and they stated their methodologies and the limitations of the methodologies that they have used and the findings and the implications of those findings, I think we need to give them a benefit of doubt. And again, this is science, and you know, there are always limitations to almost each and everything. What we are saying is that by looking at only that one side of the story and not looking at what is happening behind the scenes, what is happening in the whole process, the electoral process, by ignoring that and only looking at one side, I think it is being, you know, punitive and insensitive to pollsters. And let us also know that, you know, creating a lot of unnecessary tensions, if I may call it, to a situation that actually is very much clear. You can interpret those numbers and the interpretations are there, and then there must have been a reason, and I'll let Kenyans know. Why is it that the law that was passed back in 2012 in Kenya allows opinion polls to be published only? You know, there's a lead time. There's in the lead time of 5 days before the polls, nothing should be published. There is a reason. This bill was fronted by Boni Halwale, the senator-elect for Kakamega. And when it was fronted, the argument was that opinion polls were part of the recipe to the 2007 post-election mayhem. Because they were used basically by all those people who thought opinion polls showed we are winning and we are not winning, you know, that kind of a thing. And so Boni Halwale came up with a bill to control opinion pollsters. And actually, he had a session, he had a meeting with the Marketing and Social Research Association, because they were also looking at global practices. There are some countries in the world that do not control opinion polling. Others leave a window. There are those who do not allow opinion polls at all 1 month to the, you know, to the election. So it's varied, the varied implementation of that kind of a clause across the world. So in consultation with the Marketing and Social Research Association, which is the umbrella body that is there's the industry body for market and social researchers in Kenya, they actually advised, the researchers advised that let's go with 5 days prior to the poll. So there was our effect. There was our input into that particular bill. And that bill was published so that nobody will ever in future use opinion polls to say that they won or they predicted the election wrongly. So even the bill acknowledges the fact that there could be so many other factors that could change an election after the opinion poll, which can actually call an election, can decide an election, besides the opinion poll. But I've given that explanation to Kenyans so that they understand that it is not just about the opinion polls. We have given so many other issues, issue-based polls. Let's look at also those other issues which are important. And this one number that the media projects, it is this versus this. I think the media should first take the interpretation. This is the interpretation before even they show the numbers. So there is also a level of bias in the way they are reported, and how some of the very critical facts in the interpretation are also ignored.
I think just before we take a break, there's one question that I've seen repeatedly being asked, especially in the public, when it comes to the methodology that pollsters use, which is basically, ethno-political zones. The Nyanza region, the Mombasa region. All right, Dan will continue because my mic has.
Oh, sorry. So before we get to her question, why is it that, and I'll still stay with you for a bit, why don't you reputable pollsters come together, because you are funding your study, Infotrack is doing theirs, TIFA is doing theirs, name it. Why not come together, especially for a poll as significant as the national one, and do one which will allow you to have a larger sample size, have a bit more granulated data.
Bigger data.
Where, I mean, is there a scientific reason, or is it, why doesn't that happen?
Let me ask a question really here. So even if we did an opinion poll with 100,000 people, extremely representative and extremely robust, but the process again as whole, will we ever predict an election in this country?
Maybe it limits. Go ahead.
What we are saying is that there are those other issues around the process. There are those other issues. Even if we did an opinion poll, and there's still a lead of 7 days to the election day, those opinion polls will never, to the fact, because what we are saying is that voter intention is a moving target. Voter intention is a moving target. It solidifies at the last minute.
You see, the challenge is that...
Sorry, even before we get into the challenge, I just need us to take a quick break, then we can come and wrap up, and we'll pick up from the challenge. We'll take a short break on Decision 2022. We'll be back as we close with these good people on the round table, as well as Zainab Ismail. Stay with us. Thank you.
Magic.
Join our September 2022 intake, download an application form from our website and enroll today. Or visit any of our campuses in Limuru, Nairobi, Machakos or Nakuru. This is St. Paul's University, your university of choice.
Welcome to the NBA Finals.
Now this is a celebration.
The Finals.
when 60-foot prayer can get answered at the buzzer.
It's more like 61 feet.
I mean, you gotta be great from game 1 to game 7. Because when the champagne stops popping, does anybody know what's left? Legendary status, my man. Yes, Dirk. Exactly. Oh my greatness.
Dave, this line is not going down, and you're burning up. But I'll sort you out, my friend. See that barrier? Go for it. Yeah.
Bing bang bing. Kama mbunge wako, umefanya vizuri sana kunipigia simu. Nikishika simu yako hivi, kitu ya kwanza, okoa jahazi yako, nalipa. Fuliza, nalipa. Hautawahi fanya please call me tena. Those are things of the past. Airtime yenye nitakununulia ni for life. Wewe na familia yako nikupatie bundles. Utakuwa kwa internet 24/7. Hata ukikufa mahali utaenda bado utakuwa unasafia huko. Mimi nakwambia kama mbunge wako hautawahi teseka tena. Hautawahi reverse call mtu tena kwa sababu umenipigia simu.
To get political promises, dial *812*799#.
Skiza na Nation.
This is NTV.
Welcome back to this last part of the hours that we might be having. Very insightful conversations here, which have been, littered by significant pronouncements in regard to the presidential election results by the IEBC in terms of part of the IEBC, as well as the man who was ranked number 2 in the race, that is Raila Amolo Odinga. And would need to come to a close in this. So, Dr. you were about to say something as we come to a close.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think the purpose of why people do science is the generality that we get from the study. And that is why it becomes an important thing. That you can generalize and say, even if it was medicine, that though you will not do that with it won't be polling, but you can generalize from that to say, therefore, this is the trend. So that even if we didn't have election assuming, we will say that according to the polls, this is the generality, and therefore it is fair to park this issue here. And that is why it became a very important issue, because with science we generalize. And we are saying this is the trend, and this is probably the outcome. Secondly, it is the issue of probability. That what is the probable chance that all the polls that published had Raila Amolo Odinga ahead by that same number, and they were all wrong. That is why we are having this conversation. That is it random? That they were all right. Either they were all perfect or they were all wrong, but as a choir, doing independent polls separately, there is very little probability that they will all make the same exactness or the same mistake, and then find all of them that NASA was ahead. That is what is raising some doubt. Second, finally, because, of course, so we are not shocked when a politician gets it wrong, because they are talking about their self-interest. But when a body come and say, I'm a scientist, listen to me, and they first clear their throat and say, now wait, forget the politics, I'm talking to you as a scientist. There is a little high expectation, as she was saying. There is a little bit of vulnerability of the listeners, because people raise their ears to say, there is generality and let science guide our life. We don't do these polls for the sake of just fun. Science is done to guide decisions. And therefore, I cringe. Suppose this was a medicine that got it this wrong, and we said this is what should be in the market.
And this is a social science.
And within that, the social scientists doing it should know that I'm doing it for Kenyans, who, by the way, I sympathize with pollsters, because severally, I have even border, and once they profile you to be of a certain whatever, they give you the answer that they want you to hear. And so to that extent, I think to me that is the simplest explanation. They know where you want to go, they assume, and they will tell you exactly the same. This is an African culture where people are not very social with strangers, of saying, this is my religion, this is, I'm married. This is not a very liberal society. This is a conservative society where people only talk to the people they trust. And therefore, all those, at the end of the day, it's not about whom to blame, but it is about should polls and where do we park them or place them in terms of generalizing or making decisions if they are wrong. And of course, you know, two wrongs does not make a right. We cannot say because there is this other factor, because server was not opened, the polls, suppose we relied on polls to replace the server, will we have been a better place?
Okay.
Thank you.
Closing comments.
Yesterday, I think when we witnessed chaos at Bomas, there was an air of fear. Today again, I think when we heard that there was going to be a presser, again there was an air of fear. But I am glad because nothing has gone wrong. Kenya is our motherland. And note, underline the word mother. So we are children who have been raised by our mother, and now we have jobs, and we are trying to outdo each other in terms of who loves mommy the most. I think for me that is the scenario, the kind of scenario that is playing out, because everybody in whichever way they present themselves is expressing their love for this country in the best way they know how. Everyone is working towards building. And that for me gives me a lot of comfort. And I like that at the end of this, we will have a better election than we had in 2017. We will have a better election than we had in 2022, because we will have the lessons from those two elections. And if people are celebrating us, despite what's happening now, I am smiling in my heart at the thought of what they will do in 2027.
Okay, briefly, Mudoka.
Yeah, I think this discourse that we are having is a very insightful kind of discourse. There will always be, you know, arguments for and arguments against some of the things that we do. But let us also appreciate that this is a stage of our democracy, you know. And also let us remember that we have a past, you know, a past that has influenced the way we perceive things, and always the past has that kind of a reality of influencing the way we perceive things, the way we look at things, and the way we interpret situations. And I think as part of deepening democracy, it is important to allow, you know, all these consenting voices, all the scenarios to come to the table and just appreciate. In fact, let me be on air and say this, that I have lived long enough to host you know, politicians in a room and see the appreciation that they would have on numbers. You know, they're looking at the numbers and they take notes and they actually form strategies out of that. And immediately they walk out there, they go and trash the same numbers. I have lived long enough to see that. I don't think there's anything wrong with opinion polls. And this is not a conversation that will die anytime soon.
Yes.
I could imagine Nation Media Group is a reputable media house, but they still...
The imagination is verified.
Exactly, and they still set up budgets to still do opinion polls and publish them, and they pay for them. And I think this is our responsibility in terms of deepening democracy. And we will see much more of this. Opinion polls are happening in all developed democracies, and they are appreciated. And data-driven decision-making is something that we cannot avoid as a country. So there will always be some data. And then the other thing, please allow me to say this, just to quote this. Remember all the brands that we use. All the brands that we use in our daily lives. And you can look at brands right from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. All the array of brands. Anybody who makes those brands would want to understand the consumers, would want to understand the brands themselves, how they are doing and all that. Again, you can still call that an opinion. It is a consumer opinion. And unless that data is available, then we wouldn't have some of the successes that we have seen. So we might look at opinion poll as one thing, but research as a pathway to business success, to the success of programming, is something that experts have done and done very well. So we only, it's an insight to look at it from only one point of view and just ignore the other facts.
Thank you very much. And this brings to a close our discussion here. And I will just request the indulgence of my director for less than a minute. Duncan, I'm seeing a lot of questions online asking whether you have any relation to Miguna. Do you?
Yeah, almost. It's not I'm very proud of that. Though I disagree with some of his nini, but Miguna is somebody that I will mimic. You know, people say copycat. At least I'm copying the right cat. So I'm very proud of that. I don't know whether we have a relationship, but we are both Luos, so chances that...
All Luos are related. I saw someone else saying the same.
And that is a good thing.
Not a bad thing at all. Thank you very much.
Duncan, what are they saying you resemble?
Huh? They've not said. Okay. So thank you very much, Duncan Ojwang, who is a political commentator also.
No, I'm not a political commentator.
No, he is a lawyer, an advocate. He is...
Human rights advocate.
Human rights advocate.
Yeah. And the dean, of course.
The dean of the School of Law, Africa Nazarene, as well as Achieng Osogo and Samuel Mudoka, director at Ipsos. My name is Dan Mwangi. Thank you for being with us. We continue our coverage of Decision 2022. I hand you over to Zainab.
All right, thanks, Dan. That's a close on this block. We hand it over to our colleagues Salim Swaleh and Nuru Abdulaziz to take us through the next stage of Decision 2022. Just two things to note today afternoon. The Azimio la Umoja coalition presidential candidate Raila Odinga has rejected the presidential results, and he's expected to head to the courts to challenge that result. And we also had the statement from the 4 IBC commissioners disowning the election results, claiming the chairman of Wafula Chebukati had sole access to the portal back end where the final tally was being conducted. So that is the state of the election as we stand. My name is Zena Biswal. Thank you for watching. Till tomorrow. Good evening.